Welcome to Saga Sessions, a show where we explore, analyze, and discuss our favorite stories. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Nick and I are back to talk about more Indiana Jones. If you have not seen our breakdown of Raiders of the Lost Ark, you can click on the card above. There will also be a link in the description below. So today we are moving on to film number 2, and that is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Nick, is this your favorite Indiana Jones film?
I think at the time being it might be.
Really? Okay.
Which I am well aware how unpopular of an opinion that is. Of the original trilogy, I know that it's definitely the worst, but it still might be one of my favorites.
Interesting. It's Steven Spielberg's least favorite, and he's very open about saying so. Just right off the bat, it's not my favorite Indiana Jones film. It might actually be my least favorite Indiana Jones film, but it does have my favorite Indiana Jones character, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But time for some backstory on the film. Just like with Raiders of the Lost Ark, this was a George Lucas and Steven Spielberg production. This is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is that right?
Correct. It takes place in 1935, which is the year before Raiders of the Lost Ark. Lucas wanted to do it this way so he could avoid the usage of Nazis. Is that correct?
He didn't want to make a film with Nazis as the villains again, even though he would later with the third Indiana Jones film. But he wanted to take a step back, use a different setting, and make a darker film. The thuggy cult, those are the main villains in the Temple of Doom. But yeah, let's dive into the film. Of course, Harrison Ford is back as Indiana Jones. Nobody else can play the character except Harrison Ford, so we are very pleased that he returned. And we are introduced to a new leading lady who happens to be Nick's favorite leading lady in the entire Indiana Jones franchise, right?
Well, Willie Scott, who is played by Kate Capshaw, definitely is not my favorite of the leading ladies. Probably coming in at dead last for me. It's pretty tough to be compared to Karen Allen's performance as Marion. This is just a wildly strange take on a character. Can't say that it necessarily worked in the entire movie, but she was there. Definitely she was there.
Why do you think they moved on from Karen Allen?
So the initial idea of Indiana Jones, as we talked about before, was George Lucas wanted this to be like James Bond. So he thought that he needed a different leading lady in every movie, which stuck around for the first 3 movies, the original trilogy, and then obviously Karen Allen returned, which I think is a real shame because I think it would have been interesting. Obviously, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there is a lot of stuff put forward that already implicates that they had this long past. So there's a lot of history to that we could have seen just right there, but they wanted to change that up and bring Willie Scott back.
I have to say that Willie Scott is also my least favorite Indiana Jones leading lady. Nothing against Kate Capshaw. She, I thought, as an actress, she did a fine job. She worked with the script that was given to her, but I think even she likes to poke fun at the fact that all she does is scream, complain about her broken nails, and yeah, all that stuff.
Which is interesting because Spielberg... So there's multiple things about that where she didn't apparently know how to scream. Spielberg has talked about that before, where he had to teach her how to scream on set, and then he even said at points they would just, we're going to dub you over. We're going to put,
right.
And then also that she, in reality, wasn't actually this type of character. She wasn't this bigger figure that thinks that they're all that. She was actually much more humble, very polite. And then when they rolled camera, she clicked at it.
This film also introduces possibly the most memorable character in the whole franchise, who also happens to be my favorite character in all 5 films, and that's Short Round, played by the incredible Ke Huy Quan, who has quite a story. He was in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, he was in The Goonies, and then he kind of went behind the scenes and worked behind the camera, made a comeback recently, won an Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I love this guy. I love Short Round.
You can't forget his involvement in The Encino Man with Brendan Fraser.
I've never seen that.
Him and Fraser have some good chemistry together in that movie.
Okay. I just think Ke Huy Quan has great chemistry with everybody.
He does. You know how he got the part though?
Tell us.
So he apparently, as this young kid, was going in for the audition for his brother. His brother was going in for the audition, and he was just there to support him. And I guess by miracle chance, they saw him instead, and they had him try out. And you can also find some of his rehearsal tapes, and it's a little bit more choppy when you watch him in rehearsal. But then when they were doing the card scene when him and Harrison Ford were playing poker, and how it was a little bit more choppy in rehearsal, and then when they actually do it in the movie, it is so natural and it is so flawless how he just can riff with someone who's significantly older than him, but have this great chemistry, and it's funny and it's very endearing, and he really does make such an impact on the movie.
One of my favorite lines: "I very little, you cheat very big." That gets me every time.
No, it's a great scene when he's calling out Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, on cheating because he has an extra card. He has 5 instead of 4 cards,
right.
And then he starts yelling at him, and then Indy sees right up his sleeve he has an ace that he's been hiding, so he's also been cheating at the same time.
It's great. I love that character. And we'll talk about him more as we break down the film.
So I had a question for you before we move on from the characters and the actors. I'd been thinking about this the last few days, and I was just wondering, now that we've seen Raiders and we have the prequel to Raiders, Harrison Ford is obviously, I talked about him very highly last time. He is very becoming of the role, but except for like Tom Selleck, who had done the screen test for it, who do you think would have been a really good Indiana Jones?
Oh my goodness. Maybe Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas, he has the look for it.
And he was in a few like adventure films,
Romancing the Stone,
Jewel
of the Nile.
Jewel of the Nile.
I think if you look at some older actors, I think Charlton Heston from Planet of the Apes could have been really good. You look at like a film that Spielberg has actually even talked very highly about influencing his film career was The Greatest Show on Earth. And the poster is Charlton Heston standing on the front. He's got a leather jacket and a fedora on, and he looks just like Indiana Jones. One of my favorite actors, I think, Robert Mitchum, which I know that some people would roll their eyes because I do like him a lot, but
I like him too.
He does, he did a lot of old noir films, very much in the same vein of, I think, what Indiana Jones was kind of going for. I also think my favorite actor, Paul Newman, could have done something with the role.
I didn't know Paul Newman was your favorite actor.
He is, yeah. He's been my favorite actor for a long time. Always does great stuff, but I think he could have been interesting. Another one I think is Ernie Hudson from...
I have no idea who this guy is.
From Ghostbusters fame. He's one of the Ghostbusters.
Okay.
He, I feel like, could bring the same physicality as Harrison Ford while still also bringing the same like charm and humor, but, at the end of the day, Harrison Ford does it best.
To answer your initial question, I guess all I can say is Michael Douglas.
That's a good answer.
All right, cool. Shall we break down the film?
I think we should.
We begin in Shanghai, in Club Obi-Wan.
Clearly a reference to some old scripts that George Lucas wrote.
Yeah, some irrelevant character that probably nobody's ever heard of, who just George Lucas made up and put back on the shelf. But anyways, Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, is meeting a client named Lao She, I believe.
Lao She, that's right.
But before the story begins, we are treated to a musical number sung by Kate Capshaw. And I have to say, in the last Indiana Jones review that we did, Raiders of the Lost Ark, I spoke about my favorite shot in the whole franchise. This film, in this scene, contains my least favorite shot in the whole franchise. It's the title card for the film where it says Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But the problem is they put Kate Capshaw in front of the words. So you can't even see the word of. You can't see the full title. And that just drives me insane. It's bothered me ever since I was a small child watching this film.
So that is your least favorite shot in the entire franchise.
In the entire franchise.
What do you think about starting the entire movie with a musical number, though? What do you think about the preceding music, dance, and song?
Well, according to Spielberg, Lucas came to him and said, I want to start this movie off with like a Busby Berkeley musical number. I can't tell if Steven Spielberg was a fan of the idea or not, but he did it. But in regards to how I feel about it, it's weird. It's
an interesting choice.
It's an interesting choice. I don't hate it. I think I'm just so bothered by the fact that they covered up part of the title that
just everything was just noise after that.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I will say, I think Indiana Jones obviously has a lot of great things going for it. I think one of the biggest things that this series has is great intros. So we get the Temple of the Golden Idol in Raiders of the Lost Ark. We get the circus train scene with River Phoenix in Last Crusade. Of the trilogy, this is my favorite intro.
Oh, so you're a fan of the musical number.
I love the musical number. I think it's a great change of pace. I think the entire intro is pretty much up until they get onto the plane. At least that's how I see it. And every part of it is perfect. I think it is funny. I think it is intense. I think it builds a different tone. Obviously, straight from Raiders of the Lost Ark, they're trying to go for something new. And as they say, there's one thing that you can't say about this movie is that it's not original. It's very different from the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Very different.
Which, this is Spielberg's first sequel he's ever made.
Is it really?
He didn't I think they had offered him to do Jaws 2 and he said no, he didn't want to do any sequels, and this is the first one, and he changed it up for sure. But every little thing in this scene is great. I mean, you get the obvious homage to James Bond with Harrison Ford coming in the white and black tux with the white coat and the red flower on his chest.
Okay.
Which is,
I never looked at it that way, but yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It's the exact same suit from Goldfinger that James Bond wears.
Like the actual suit?
It's not the actual suit,
okay.
But it's supposed to be the homage to it. You know what I mean?
I see. Okay.
And then, the entire dance sequence I think is great, even though the dancing from Kate Capshaw obviously was restricted by the dress.
That's right. There is a documentary out there that details the behind the scenes of the Temple of Doom, and there's one for every Indiana Jones film, at least in the original trilogy. And in that documentary, they speak about how Kate Capshaw learned full choreography for the musical number, and at the last minute, they realized the dress was too tight for her, and she wasn't able to dance. She was restricted to singing. And she was very disappointed, and
she had said that they'd gone through so much choreography to actually get the dancing done, that when they actually put the dress on, which apparently was a one-of-a-kind dress that they had to have in the movie, that she just they weren't allowed to dance after that.
It's a shame.
That's a bummer.
Maybe I would have enjoyed the beginning a little bit more. Who knows? So after the musical number, Indiana Jones sits down with his client, Lao She, and we get a sequence involving
a trade-off.
Right?
Of a large diamond and human remains.
The human remains of Nurhaci.
That's right. And some things go awry, I believe, that Lao She asks for the diamond back, and we realize that Indy has been poisoned.
And Lao She offers him the antidote in exchange for the diamond. So Indiana Jones was fooled.
He was. Also, in this scene, much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, as I had said in the previous episode, Indiana Jones is not introduced as a traditional good character, right? So we get John Williams' score that's very down tempo and it's very dark for who his character is and the shadowing from Raiders. For this, he's kind of a scoundrel. Mm-hmm. He's not trading like we see him in Raiders for artifacts to do good with them. He's trading for riches. So much so that he is willing to essentially murder Willie Scott, one of Lauchet's dancers. He's not supposed to be the best guy in the world.
Right. And in fact, I actually remember you. I remember you in the last episode that we did. You were talking about how Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, isn't exactly a hero in the Temple of Doom. And I was wondering why you said that. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I mean, obviously the opening scene, like I just said, he's pretty much trying to kill this. He's willing to kill this woman to save his own life, and he doesn't really regard anyone else. As the entire movie goes on, obviously by the end of it, he is the hero, and he, saves all the children and gets the stones back and everything. The entire first half of the movie, he was talking about fortune and glory, right?
Right.
A great line when he's talking to Short Round, saying "fortune and glory, kid." Right? It's all about him. He doesn't really care to do all this stuff to save a village until he learns about it realistically, sees how bad it actually is. He's kind of just in it for his own, which, it's a very human trait, I would say, but at the same time, it's not very becoming of a traditional hero that we think of.
I see.
Now, of course, again, by the end of it, he becomes Indiana Jones, the hero that we know.
He becomes the hero that we see in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's right.
Back to the story, we meet very briefly an old friend of his whose name I can't remember, but he has a gun pointed at Lauchet and one of his sons. And do you remember this sidekick's name?
I do not, unfortunately.
Yeah, neither do I, but he seems like a really cool character. He gets killed, and as he's dying, he implies that he's been on many adventures with Indiana Jones. So they obviously have this history that I would love to know more about, but he gets killed. It's sad when he dies. And then all hell breaks loose.
Before all hell breaks loose, remember in the last episode I had mentioned how many good gags there were throughout the movie, very Charlie Chaplin-esque.
I do.
Very Buster Keaton-like, and, kind of like the Three Stooges, a lot of bumbling comedy. That's also in this movie, too. Even though this is a darker movie and it is more of a tonal shift, there's still stuff like that. And this scene specifically is one of those to start it off where I love this part where everybody starts popping corks off champagne bottles and the gunfire is masked by the corks popping off. So nobody can tell, and, his sidekick dies and nobody's the wiser until more gunfire goes off. In a very impressive way, how it all starts with a skewer of kebabs going through one of the henchmen on fire, nonetheless, and that's when the gunfire all starts then.
And we end up with Willie Scott joining Indiana Jones on his adventure. Lots of screaming, lots of diamond hunting, but
another great gag where everybody's on the floor. Indy's trying to get the antidote. Willie's trying to get the diamond, and then ice falls on the floor, and now you're looking around through ice for the diamond that matches everything.
Right.
Clearly Spielberg, that's something that comes from Spielberg, not Lucas. Spielberg has always had more of that childish wonder in directing, and we've seen it through every movie he's pretty much made, even if it's a darker tone or not. So all that stuff is definitely from Spielberg's mind.
And then we're introduced to my favorite character, Short Round. I love that guy. I wish he was in more Indiana Jones movies. And sorry to stray away from the plot, but this is something I really wanted to happen, but it did not, and I'm sad about it. And we'll talk about it more when we get to this particular film. But why wasn't Short Round in the Dial of Destiny? Missed opportunity.
I would much more have preferred him than his sidekick in the film, Phoebe Bridgers.
Oh, Helena.
He would have been a substitute in there, but also he wouldn't have fit as well.
It was right during the height of Ke Huy Quan's comeback as an actor.
He had just won his Oscar, and then they started making the movie.
Why isn't he in that movie? And now I digress. But
so there's an impressive stunt throughout exiting Club Obi-Wan, where they do the traditional rolling gong, and they use that as coverage from the gunfire, jump out the window to a fall down into the car where we are introduced to Short Round, your favorite character. Right off the bat, he's cooking. He knows what he's doing. He knows what to say. He's funny.
He knows how to drive.
For the most part, maybe a few pedestrians are getting hit, but he's getting the job done, which leads to a little bit of a fun car chase with him and
Lao She
and his goons. So when they get to the actual airport, there is a gentleman ushering them to the plane. You know who this is, right?
Oh, I do not know.
This is played by Dan Aykroyd, the famous Ghostbuster.
Dan Aykroyd, that's him?
That is Dan Aykroyd in a, I believe, uncredited part. He is good friends with Steven Spielberg. They made the movie 1941 back in 1979. And I don't know why he wanted to be in the movie. He probably just asked to be in Indiana Jones and had this little cameo. And Harrison Ford said, "I owe you a gin," which is great. I think that's hilarious how his delivery is in it. And I just think that's a fun little cameo that I don't even think is credited.
I had no idea. That's awesome.
And then this is also this is one of the scenes that my brother and I always cracked up to when we were younger, was when he's yelling that he thinks he got away, and he says, something about "see you later, Lao She," and he shuts the door, and then you can read on the door, it says Lao She, and it's
right.
very funny.
So while they're all asleep, the pilot and I think the co-pilot bail. They parachute out of the plane and leave no parachutes behind. It's Willie who wakes up first and realizes that there's no pilot, and then she tries to get Indiana Jones to fly the plane. Turns out he doesn't know how to fly, but he says, "How hard can it be?"
I was watching it this time around, and him saying that, and I was like, oh, that's funny, because I know that they make a callback to that in The Last Crusade.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly he doesn't know how to fly, but then all of a sudden he knows a plane, because he starts checking everything and he starts using all the right terminology.
Right.
And he knows what should be on and what shouldn't be on. So I don't really know what the deal is there, but I think it was kind of funny.